Thank you for tuning in once again to his Vine and Fig Tree podcast. My name is Kurt Olson. I'm your host. I'm coming to you in the late morning of May 21st, 2025. And just a personal matter before I get into a few news items. Um, uh, Late this evening, about 11:15 marks the 2-year anniversary of my mom dying. For those of you who do know me, my dad died when I was really young. My mom raised my brother and me by herself. She never remarried, and just a somewhat of an emotional day in that regard. Um, my family would certainly appreciate your prayers on that. But I know my mom was also very supportive of both of her sons, all of our endeavors. My brother and I are very different in a lot of ways, and that's a good thing. But uh, just just a kind of a personal note at the start of this. Um, I want to jump into a couple of things here, and I'm going to start with the Pope, Pope Leo. Pope Leo was appointed. Was elected a couple of weeks ago. Um, I came out on social media and I said that he was an anti-Trump pick, and I believe that, and I believe there's many reasons for that that I'm going to enumerate here very quickly. The first one is that there was a kind of a photo that came out of Donald Trump as the Pope. Now, MAGA knew it was a joke, and MAGA knew people shouldn't take it seriously. I don't think the Vatican saw it that way. Secondly, as Team Trump has been engaged in the whole U.S. Uh, aid review of programs, some of the stuff they have cut has affected Catholic charities, and I'm sure it has not gone unnoticed. And then thirdly, this Pope, um, as he was a cardinal, has been critical of Donald Trump, and so Pope Leo the 14th, Cardinal Robert Prevost of Chicago, by way of also Peru, spent many years there. Um, he was the fourth vote, and obviously a compromise candidate. But as I'm sure his name surfaced, I am not suggesting every cardinal who supported him had this as a motive. But I am suggesting some of them, specifically in perhaps the United States and parts of Western Europe, did have this as a motive, that naming an American Pope would also go a long way toward distancing, and this Pope in particular go a long way toward distancing the Vatican from Washington, D.C., because of various things that have affected the Catholic Church, and how this Pope has been critical of some Trump policies. But Prevost is a very traditional Catholic. Um, has come out already with statements on the family and the issue of abortion. So it it will be very interesting. Now, some people would argue that because I'm not a Catholic, I should just keep my nose out. I have communicated this in the past, and I'm going to do it again right here. As someone who follows current events, things that involve the Catholic Church can impact how Christianity is viewed worldwide. There are some very clear, very strong doctrinal differences with Catholics. But as I communicated a number of weeks ago, when Christians are under persecution in name the country in Africa or Asia, um, they don't care if you're a Catholic. They don't care if you're a Protestant. They care only that you call yourself a Christian. Um, and so I'm going to leave the Pope Leo stuff there, but I believe there are very strong reasons why this cardinal who has been elevated to Pope fulfills some anti-Trump um, maneuvers by the cardinals, and specifically certain cardinals, not all of them. I'm gonna leave that there. Okay, um, air traffic. I'm gonna go back to the incident that happened a number of weeks ago, a couple months ago now, maybe, when the Black Hawk helicopter in the DC area hit the American Airlines plane that ended up killing, what was it, 67 people, 68 people, something like that. Everyone aboard the American Eagle, I think it was like 64 plus um, the crew. And I believe the Black Hawk was affected as well because that had to be fished out of the water. So an interesting story emerged on a week ago. The one that I'm going to read a little bit of is specifically the New York Post. I believe there were other media sources that did cover this as well because I believe it came from a congressional hearing. There's a hotline that connects the Pentagon to Reagan National, and I believe it is because of the air traffic that can come with military aircraft in the DC area. And so there's a hotline that's supposed to be part of this communication. Well, it was inoperable for 3 years. And who was the Department of Transportation head? Pete Buttigieg, the guy who we were supposed to see as this impeccable uh, person for transportation in the Biden administration. Come to find out, they didn't have it all together many times. A hotline connecting, I'm going to read just a few paragraphs. A hotline connecting the Pentagon with air traffic controllers at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport has been inoperable since March 2022. A Federal Aviation Administration official revealed during a stunning Wednesday hearing on Capitol Hill. The downed line was not only noticed after the tragic mid-air collision between a Black Hawk helicopter and a regional passenger plane over the Potomac River that killed 67 on January 29th. FAA Air Traffic Organization Deputy COO Franklin McIntosh told the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. McIntosh claimed panel chairman Ted Cruz of Texas that the Defense Department was supposed to maintain the direct line, but never told air traffic controllers that it was down. And the head of the Pentagon, the SecDef for Team Biden, was Lloyd Austin. So a serious lapse here occurred. Um, I don't think everybody is saying it was the reason this happened. But certainly doesn't help when communication is needed between a military aircraft like a Black Hawk helicopter and a plane that's just doing its normal activity and flying into Reagan National. So it will be interesting to see what comes of that. Um, as there's been an awful lot of criticism about air traffic recently, and specifically even a couple weeks ago, with warnings that people should not fly into Newark, New Jersey, because it is dangerous to do so. All right, the budget bill. The budget bill is moving forward in the House. Um, don't know when we're going to have a final approval. But here's the key thing on this. There's a bunch of things that I'm looking at in the final passage of this thing. Um, Number one, are there tax cuts coming? That would be advantageous. Um, um, a second big issue is, are Republicans going to have the courage to codify the DOGE cuts into the budget? Um, that's going to be something to look out for. And secondly, and thirdly, um, even as of 2 weeks ago, I was reading stories that talked about how, because Donald Trump did not believe the Congress had the courage to cut spending, they were going to have to come up with a mechanism to raise some additional revenue. Um, and one of the things they were looking at was a tax on millionaires who make 2 million or more. And so that's interesting as well. A very traditional, Republicans don't do that kind of position, suddenly being taken by a Republican administration. It will be interesting if those kinds of things emerge in the final passage of this bill. And there has been an awful lot of people on social media, X, and even Facebook, I've seen, oh, we can't, the budget bill isn't perfect, but you can't make perfect the enemy of the good. And, people want the tax cuts and a variety of other things that will be coming in this that are Trump priorities. And I'm just sitting here from a distance, and there are certain things that I'm looking for. And if I warned people back in January after Trump was inaugurated, and I started talking about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency that Elon Musk did, and I talked extensively about it here. Um, I warned people that the biggest hurdle was going to be the Congress having the courage, the Congress having the guts to actually make some of these things codified into the budget. It will be fascinating to find out if that is able to happen. I know that there are people like Thomas Massey, Chip Roy, others who would have no problem doing so. But there are others in both bodies, Republicans, who I believe are a whole lot more standoffish and can't pull it off. Last two things I want to talk about here involve Joe Biden. And the first one I want to talk about is the book that hit shelves yesterday by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. Jake Tapper from CNN, Alex Thompson from Axios. They collaborated on a book on Biden's decline. Now, or cognitive decline. Now, I have no desire to read this. First of all, why would you go to profit two people who were part of the cover up of the president's cognitive decline? Okay. Everything that was happening before our eyes, we were told, don't believe your lying eyes. As the president would trip up steps at Air Force One, as he would be giving speeches, and he would struggle to put out a sentence, let alone a paragraph, as he would be concluded with a public appearance, turn around, go to shake someone's hand, and there is no one there. Being confused about whether to go stage right or stage left, all of that. All of that was happening before our eyes. And there are other instances that are far more egregious. And why would you buy a book? Why? The title for this book is fascinating. It's called Original Sin. Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson titled this book Original Sin. Now, for me as a follower of Christ, original sin is the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. When they disobeyed God, they cursed mankind after that. And that's why mankind needs redemption. That's why mankind needs salvation. That's why mankind needs to realize the need for the Messiah, Jesus Christ. So put that aside. It's fascinating because sin is not a word that the media talks about at all. We don't have conversations about sin in this country, and they've kind of taken a obvious theological phrase and flipped it on its head and used it for political purposes. But I have no desire to read a single sentence of this book because I know what my eyes told me, and it was pretty obvious. We had a president in his early 80s, and he was declining before our very eyes. And his family, the Democratic Party, and the mainstream media. And when I say mainstream media, I'm talking ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, PBS, the major newspapers in this country, um, a variety of others, MSNBC. They covered the entire time until it was obvious in the June 2024 debate between Biden and Trump that the decline was obvious. And I regard this the biggest scandal involving presidents in our history. Because who was making decisions? What percentage of the decisions that were made specifically by Joe Biden, the person who was actually elected to be president? And if he wasn't president, pardon me, um, Kamala Harris should have been empowered to do so. And that never happened. There were an awful lot of people covering for this guy. And the American people deserve to know who was making decisions. Was it Jill? Was it Hunter? Was it the chief of staff? Or was it other staff? Who was making decisions during this time? Now, as we as this conversation has become more intense, as they were doing little snippets, and last week we had the audio of the Robert Hur uh, deposition of Biden about his documents, and that came out, and then they're talking more about the book, and all of a sudden we find out on Sunday or last weekend Joe Biden has been diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer, and that This kind of thing involving the now immediate former president should make everything hands off, involving his cognitive decline and everything else. Well, that's not going to happen. Um, and I have a perspective on what's happened with Joe Biden that is unlike a lot of other people. Now, to hear some of the conversation in the media, you're going to hear people say that there was a doctor who was on CBS News the other day. She was saying that um, because of Biden's age, the doctors for Joe Biden bypassed the PSA test for prostate health, and it became something that they did away with because of his age. If that's true, that's malpractice. But Kevin O'Connor, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, who was the doctor for Joe Biden, is getting a lot of criticism in other ways, and the cognitive decline is just one of them. Now, I have a perspective that is very, very different. Now, a lot of people are saying Biden had to have prostate cancer when he was elected, and probably when he was campaigning. I don't dismiss that. That is a very strong possibility. However, allow me to walk you through my reasoning here as to why I think a multiple COVID jabbed president, could have been a cancer that developed would go toward being a turbo cancer. Okay, this takes us um back in December, and a paper that came out in during the winter from Yale University, where they were talking about people who received the COVID-19 vaccines. And I say vaccines in plural because many people didn't have just one shot. They would have at least 2 doses and sometimes boosters. The Yale paper, um, talked about by Alex Berenson at the time, these people were saying that it's possible that the COVID-19 vaccine is attacking the immune system, and specifically T cells. Now, I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to get deep in the weeds on this. But there was research that came out. And the one thing that is the caution here is the people that they looked at, they didn't have data from these people before the COVID jabs. So it's hard to come up with a direct correlation. But that did happen. That Yale study did come out. Meanwhile, just last week, Bulgaria. Now, Bulgaria doesn't get an awful lot of attention on the international stage and otherwise. Let me tell you something about Bulgaria, and this comes from Alex Berenson as well. Alex Berenson reported just last week that see, every country has a trend line in deaths. In any given year, you might have slight rises simply because there's a bad flu season or something like that. And during COVID, we saw spikes in deaths. That's known by a lot of people. But once some kind of an infection is out and has run its course, you would expect the trend line on deaths to go back to normal. Well, the normal trend line in deaths in the United States in a given year is about 2.8, 2.9 million people. The trend line in America has not gone back to that level, despite easily being done with COVID for at least 2 years, maybe more. And I've talked about excess deaths on social media for multiple years now. There were people who were warning us, okay, this increase in deaths has happened, and we know why. The question will be, does the trend line go back to normal, which is 2.8 or 2.9 million deaths in a given year in the United States of America? It has not. It has maintained a level just above 3 million deaths per year. But let's go to two other things. And both of these have happened in recent days. I'm going to go to the first one. The first one comes from someone who I regard as the best data person I have relied on for information related to COVID. And this person takes their information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the National Institute. I want to see the other one here. It's National Cancer Institute, I believe it is. And I am going to post this in the comments. This is a chart that I am looking at, and you will see it go back to 2018. And you see, and what this chart focuses on is money spent on cancer treatment in the United States of America. And what you're going to see, you see a shaded area where the vaccines come into play. And you see that in beginning in June 2022, there is an inflection point. And what you see is a trend that develops. Now, during that period of time, there's increases and there's little drops, but this is way above the norm in terms of cancer treatments in this country. I'm going to provide you that chart that you can look at on your own. And it is money spent in the United States of America on cancer. Secondly, I want to go to something that happened just yesterday. Dr. Drew had on his show a gentleman by the name of Dr. Nicholas Holscher. And Dr. Nicholas Holscher is an epidemiologist, and he works with Dr. Peter McCullough. And Dr. Peter McCullough is perhaps the premier cardiologist in this country. Now, Dr. Nicholas Holscher was sharing with Dr. Drew on his podcast yesterday two separate studies that involved 184 million people. And the first study, 99 million people. And what you have is people who are vaccinated falling prey to myocarditis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I think you know what it is. You've seen the name before. You probably have seen the name before. And then there is a second study, 85 million people. And again, people who received the COVID jabs, higher risks for heart attack, stroke, coronary artery disease, and cardiac arrhythmia. Now, let me say this. I have seen some people in the medical profession in this country and elsewhere make the case for what we're seeing with the spike in cancer treatment. What we're seeing is turbo cancers. They're onsetting, and it's being first diagnosed when it's now stage 4. And there isn't much doctors can do for the person. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I'm just going with people who I've come to trust with data on this stuff. And what I'm suggesting is this: if our multiple jabbed former president Joe Biden has a aggressive form of prostate cancer that is now also in his bones, we're being told, and you would think that, yes, that's a very aggressive cancer. And let me say this as well: I don't wish this on anyone. I wish our scientific community would be honest with the American people and ask some hard questions about what happened during COVID, including the vaccines. But I think it is very possible that Joe Biden didn't get his aggressive form of cancer until sometime from June 22 to the present. And it came on swiftly because the numbers on the cancer treatment and the money we're spending on it proves Joe Biden isn't alone in this. And again, I don't wish this on anyone. I don't wish it on anyone. I just wish people would stop lying to us. We've seen the lies regarding the cognitive decline of Joe Biden. We see the lies in a lot of different ways. DOGE was reporting all the waste, fraud, and abuse. Stop lying to the American people. I beg you. Would some people please do some hard research on how the COVID-19 jabs have affected human beings? It is about time someone level with us. And I don't say this to be, oh, no, Olson, he's one of those COVID conspiracists. The American people are owed some honesty about what happened because there are countless people in this country who were forced to do so to keep their job. And the least they are owed is some honesty. I said when I started this, my take on this is very different from other people. And that's my take. I think it is very possible this came on between June 22 and the present. And he didn't have this at the start of his presidency. And the culprit could be a multiply uh, a president who was not just received the COVID-19 vaccine, but multiple boosters in recent years. We do not have all the answers that we need, and the American people deserve them. And it is long overdue that someone with some intestinal fortitude and some courage be honest with us. So, sorry to end it so intensely, but the Biden stuff has been absorbing a lot of stuff in the news cycle in recent days, and it was starting with the cognitive decline, and it has now moved to his aggressive form of prostate cancer. And obviously, the former president needs the prayers of people. And in fact, I'll close this episode with that. Dear Heavenly Father, we just come to you right now and we just pray for the former president. Um, Dear God, um, he needs whatever can be done to help him. I pray that his family goes about in getting that help. And you would think he has access to some amazing medical professionals. And I pray that they can steer them in the right direction. But dear God, just there's people dealing with a lot of stuff, and we ask that you would just give medical professionals wisdom, understanding on how to communicate what's going on with people to those affected by it. So just guide and direct in all of that right now, and we'll praise you for it all in Jesus' name, Amen. And with that, I'm going to end this episode of his Vine and Fig Tree podcast. And uh, I thank you for watching. For those who are doing so and doing so regularly, I thank you for your confidence in me. And I hope some of my comments here today has not steered people in a different direction. My take is very different, and I've tried to back it up with some genuine evidence. And I just that's where I am. But thank you for watching. I'm dropping another column on this one is on the explosion in LA, or not LA, Palm Springs, that happened last weekend. Um, some things involving that are part of the things going on in the culture that I think are interesting. And so I'm doing that. And until next time, God bless and goodbye.